Welcome to Football Geeks. Our guest is no stranger to the show, author of many of the most well-informed and, more importantly, most enjoyable football books of recent times, including his Cup Winners' Cup, UEFA Cup and European Cup trilogy, and his pay-on to the 1986 World Cup. And he's back with another great title, Euro 88, the Football Purists European Championship, a book that's been begging to be written, and now it has. So, welcome, Steven Scragg. Hello, Steve. How are you? You're all right, mate?
Oh, thanks for having me back on there, Phil. Much appreciated.
You're more than welcome, mate. My last time you were on, you're absolutely kind of pounding everyone in the Christmas quiz, weren't you? So the runaway winner. Yeah, and there were a few people contesting the kind of nature of the questions because they seemed quite well fitted to you, but that wasn't the intention. It just kind of panned out
the luck of the draw.
The luck of the draw, mate. The luck of the draw. So, mate, Euro 88. A great subject to write a book about. What a tournament! I mean, the obvious question is it's an obvious question to answer, really. But what was it about that particular competition that captured your imagination?
I mean, I just think it was the greatest European Championship that we got to see. Basically, you know, from a UK perspective, we were denied so much of Euro 84. As glorious of a tournament as it is, and Aidan's done a great job, you know, covering the 84 finals. You know, there were two games on live in the UK. You know, I still have a bone of contention to pick with ITV over that, and the pulling the plug, which in turn, you know, the BBC scaled back their coverage to a certain degree. But at least they gave us two games live and highlights programs, whereas ITV, I think the only coverage from ITV was basically a few goals roundups on World of Sport, and that was it. So 88, you know, having UEFA got 1980 so wrong, you know, there were a couple of, you know, fine moments in Euro 80, but not massive amounts, and the format was all wrong in them not having semi-finals, and so yeah, 88 was like a belated first European Championship in full, basically. You know, we got to see all of the games. The only ones that weren't on live were the corresponding end group games. You know, this was an era where, you know, there were still in 4 television channels in the UK, and you know, for the vast majority of us, one of those was only 6 years old. So, you know, we didn't get that split games kind of thing where, you know, the end group games, one's on one channel, one's on another. You know, so it was whichever game was the most relevant would be shown. So apart from those two group games where we get the goals at half time, full time from the other ground, you know, we saw it all. We got to see it all, and it was and what happened? It was a magnificently sunny summer as well, 1988. So it was just one of those tournaments where the football was magical, the weather was brilliant, and you know, all these icons were on the pitch. And you know, I'm 14 at this time, so you know, I can still go out and kick a ball around with all impunity. The games have taken place, and you know, we're all going out there being Van Basten and Klinsmann and, you know, Giannini, you know, Vialli, all of those great names and great players that were involved in that, to Belanov, Protasov. You know, we all wanted to be these great names and great players, and to relive these games. And yeah, not a penalty shootout, no extra time, not a red card to be seen. You know, everything just clicked into play. No goalless draws. It just absolutely clicked into gear, and it ticked every box along the way. You know, still kicking a release, tango around. You know, the kits were magnificent. And the set against the backdrop, which is still the 1974 World Cup in terms of the stadiums. You know, apart from the Olympia Stadium in Munich, which will forever look magnificently futuristic because of that you know, bespoke roof that they've got. You know, every other ground was, you know, austere, you know, pre renovation, so quite austere bowls, uncovered. So it was a good job that the rain was kept to a minimum, and yeah, but it was a strange juxtaposition, because you've got kind of like a lot of things that you relate to 1990, the summer of 1990 and the World Cup, being seen at Euro 88. You know, that German shirt, you know, those, you know, there's so many of those players that would go on and be huge stars at the 1990 World Cup. Yet here they were 2 years earlier against this backdrop that was kind of like out of date almost. It's an interesting, even retrospectively, it's an interesting juxtaposition that I've only recently kind of picked up on. And but yeah, it just had so much going for it, and obviously the top hat being, Van Basten, that goal in the final, which I'm sure we'll come to later on.
We certainly will. I mean, as you say, like the 1980 was a bit of a disaster. The format, if you lost your first game, basically you had no chance of getting to the final. So, and then 1984 had a bit of a reparative effect on the tournament, because I mean, after 1980, there was even talk that they might scrap the Euros. Can you imagine that, scrapping the Euros? So 1988 took on an even greater significance, didn't it, Steve?
It did. 84, they got it very, very right. Having got it so wrong in 1980. And what was such a shame was, if you look back to the 4-nation versions of the European Championship, the last, it had grown, and it had grown in I don't know, just how good the competition was. It had come from small, modest start in 1960. 64, still a lot of nations not quite taking it seriously, but the ones that did really kind of like, blossomed in it. For Spain to win it in the way that they did against the Soviet Union, and for a huge crowd in Madrid. And then 68, you've got kind of like Italy's win kind of endorses, the European Championship, especially given that that's the same nation that will go on and reach the 1970 World Cup final. And then by 72, you've got that magnificent West German side. Netzer's in there, it's Beckenbauer, it's Gerd Muller. It's all of those magnificent players. And suddenly the European Championship is looking, a serious competition. And then obviously you've got the iconography of Panenka in 76. But what a magnificent tournament that is, just awash with goals, high-scoring games. It's only a 4-team tournament, 4-game tournament. The finals as such, the two-legged, quarterfinals have a lot of drama to them. But there's a magnificent set of games there in 76 in Yugoslavia. The Czechoslovakia defeating the Netherlands, West Germany's comeback against Yugoslavia. Even the third place playoff is a bit madcap, and then the final itself, which is just magnificent. So for them, UEFA to get it so badly wrong in 80, which threatens the competition ludicrously. And then 84 is just majestic, and it's all about Platini and France. Yeah, it's Elkiar as well with Denmark, and Spanish redemption from being the one of the worst, if not the very worst, World Cup host in 82 to being beaten European Championship finalist in 84. A magnificent out of the blue campaign from Portugal, who hadn't been in a major competition for 18 years. So by 88, it really had come into its own again. And then there they were, all these fantastic nations that were part of this. I think every European World Cup winning nation at that point in time were part of this competition. It still didn't mean that, the reigning champions, France, failed to qualify, which, just lent into this brutality of the tournament, basically, because you had to win your qualifying group to be at this tournament. So, and that's the thing about these 8-team tournaments, and you can say the same about the 4-team nation tournaments before. And it's that, having to win your group to get there. So even if you're poor in the finals themselves, there's got to be a degree of respect, to all 8 teams that play in these particular competitions in 88, certainly 80 through 80, to 92. No matter how pragmatic 80 is, you have to take your hat off to everyone who qualified. The very same in 92. It has that great story about Denmark 92. But, across the breadth of the tournament, it's quite a poor tournament, really. The football stinks in 92. Yeah. The Netherlands are magnificent again. They should win it again, but, it's not to be. But there's a great story there, as long as you ignore the quality of the football. So 84 and 88 kind of complement each other perfectly. You've got 84, which is for the romantics. 88 is very much for the purists, because it's Lobanovsky, it's Michels, it's Beckenbauer of West Germany. You've got Vicini, who is re-energizing and restructuring Italy. And then in failing to get beyond the group stage, you've got Piontek, you've got Munez, you've got Bobby Robson and Jack Charlton. Jack Charlton appears the weak link in that set of 8 coaches, but apart from Franz Beckenbauer, Charlton's the only World Cup winner, as a player amongst those. So you can't take Jack Charlton for lightly as part of that. And just so many magical stories as well. England's capitulation is quite hypnotic, as is Denmark's. Ireland's near miss a place in the semi-finals. It's got so much going for it. Spain, dark horses as ever, but at that point in time, you just know that they're never going to be able to knock out an Italy or a West Germany. But there's great kind of like, maybe this is the time that they'll do it, and that was what every competition Spain were playing in at that point in time was all about. Maybe this is the time. No, it's not. Maybe it's this time. No, it's not. And this went on year after year, tournament after tournament, all the way up to them finally cracking the code in 2008. So every element, every team in that competition has a story behind it, and in effect as well. It's not just 2 weeks in West Germany in the summer of 1988. They're a 2-year tournament because of that brutality to qualification.
Yeah, mate. I mean, it was. I mean, as you say, every 18, every one of the 8 teams was great. And I was looking at it earlier, looking at the goals earlier as a little prelude to some fantastic goals as well. And even like the teams that purportedly underperformed, but they didn't really underperform, because if you look at both of those groups, they're absolutely both rock solid to get out of, weren't they? And Denmark, you would say, were arguably the poorest team, but they still had like Laudrup who was playing for Juventus at the top of his game, and he scored a magnificent goal against the Spanish in that tournament. And you had Spain with Butragueño, who's fantastic as well, scored one of the most contentious goals of that tournament too.
Oh, a mile offside.
Mile offside. I was watching it today. At the time, people talked about it being a mile offside, but you look at it, and it's a mile offside. It's absolutely a mile offside. But anyway, I digress, because I'm sure we'll move back onto that in a short while. So from 1984 to 1988, quite a lot changed, didn't it? Because the accepted order of international football and domestic football to an extent, but we'll stick on international because that's where we're going with this. It had changed in those 4 years. So should we talk about that, about the qualifying for 88? Because there were some shocks along the way and some really sticky qualifications, weren't there?
Oh, there absolutely were. I mean, the big near misses were, Romania, looked set to qualify at the expense of Spain, but they blew it with a draw against, I think it was Austria.
A
goal of straw, and they just needed to beat Austria to qualify because they had the superior goal difference to Spain. You had Bulgaria came to within 4 minutes. That infamous night in Sofia, where a highly under-strength, depleted Scotland got this win. Gary Mackay coming from virtually nowhere to climb off the bench. He wasn't even in the squad for that game initially. It was various dropouts through injury that brought him into the squad. Got a late caller. Then he was kind of like thrown on the bench. He had to make up the numbers on the bench. Then Paul McStay got injured in the first half, and he's thrown on for the second half. So there's so many, terms and conditions to him being there on the pitch at that point in time. The fact that Gordon Jury was side down in the build-up to the goal, and the referee really should have given a free kick, but he, for whatever reason, he either chose to ignore it or allow play to roll on, and Mackay puts the ball in the net. There's so many reasons why Ireland wouldn't be at that tournament on that, and it all just fell into place for them in a magnificent manner. And even down to kind of like Italy, they qualified with a game to spare, but in the penultimate game they faced Sweden in, I think it was in Naples at the San Paolo, and had Sweden, as unlikely as it might have seemed, had Sweden won against Italy in Naples, then they would have qualified and Italy would have been out with a game to spare, rather than eventually going on and qualifying themselves. There were a lot of near misses, And then you can look at England and just how well they played in qualifying. This was the best of Bobby Robson's qualifying campaigns, without a shadow of a doubt. Failed to qualify for the 1984 European Championships, qualified for 2 World Cups in 86 and 90 in very, very, pragmatic terms. Safety first, without a shadow of a doubt, those 2 qualifying campaigns were for the World Cups. Yet 88, very fluid. Very attractive football played. They beat Yugoslavia twice. The win at Wembley. There were again, caveats to that. Because Yugoslavia missed some, serious chances in that game. Very profligate. England took their opportunities, and Glenn Hoddle was magnificent. One of his best performances in England shirt that night at Wembley. And then come that ludicrous game in Belgrade, basically in November '87, where England are 4-0 up in 18 minutes. It's just unreal, because I've said it many a time before, that bit of an England agnostic, because as a kid I was never kind of like pointed in their direction and said that we support that team. My international football status was based on how many Liverpool players were in each team, and that I would back the one that had the most. So I can remember there being an England-Scotland game, for instance, in the early 80s, and Hansen, Souness, and Dalglish in that side, and on the England side, I think it was only Phil Thompson or Phil Neal that was playing. So it was the obvious thing to kind of like get behind Scotland to win that game. It takes a lot for an England side to really kind of like blow me away. And I'm sure I can count on one hand the amount of times that's happened, but that was definitely one of those nights. And it was great because it was an era when it was, these games, you play a team in Eastern Europe in kind of like the formative winter months, moving from autumn into winter. These were games that would take place at like 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon. So you're stumbling from school, kind of getting back from school at kind of like 3:30, 4:45 or whatever it is, and it's like bang, get the telly on because the match is taking place, and it's kind of like it was great. It was fantastic to be a kid at that point in time.
It wouldn't have been so great if you'd got in from school 20 minutes late and missed the first 18 minutes of that.
It wasn't a day to have detention, put it that way.
Absolutely right, mate. Well, I mean, it seems a ridiculous thing to ask because all the teams that went into this tournament, bar 1 or 2, were considered contenders. I mean, apart from Denmark and Ireland, probably you'd say that all 6 had a kind of reasonable chance of getting somewhere within the tournament. But who can you recall who were the real serious contender? I know Italy had just they got rid of Berzot after the 84 Euro campaign, hadn't they? And 86.
He coached them at the 86 World Cup, but Bezo had essentially stayed in the job 4 years too long. He should have bowed out with his World Cup win in 82. And then, once they had this abject qualifying campaign for the 84 European Championship, again, there was an opportunity to say, well, enough's enough, and it's someone else time to come and do this. But no, we hung on until 86, and again, it was an insipid World Cup for Italy. So Vicini comes in, and he's had such a run all the way up to the senior job through all the different junior ranks and being assistant and the way it's done in other nations. And he brings so many under 21 players in, and that's one of the great things, that such a change from 86 to 88, and obviously the building towards the 1990 World Cup. And pre-tournament, it's everything's about West Germany's a stepping stone towards hosting the World Cup in 1990, and they went in relatively unconsidered in many respects. Denmark were it was recognised that Denmark were on the wane a bit. Elkjær had a couple of injury problems through the season. Laudrup was individually sound, but he'd been part of a Juventus side that had seriously underachieved. They'd only just sneaked UEFA Cup qualification that season, so there was a bit of a turmoil you know, in the Juventus camp at that point in time. And you're looking at kind of like a 37-year-old. So, you know, Morten Olsen. And then, you know, a lot of aging players at that point in time. And you know, that they qualified very frugally. They'd only won, I think they'd won 3 and drew 2, lost 1 of the 6 games they played in qualifying. They'd only scored 4 goals. And 2 of those had been scored by Jan Molby, who Piontek didn't take to West Germany because he didn't feel he was fit enough for it, because he'd had a big you know, injury that season and missed a lot of football for Liverpool. So they kind of got it right that Denmark were kind of going to struggle. They got it badly wrong about Italy. And England were actually the only other seeded team apart from West Germany, because they were the first to qualify. They qualified emphatically, and part of it was as well that, you know, the UEFA thinking was that, well, if we seed England, we can dictate exactly where they're playing, and then keep an eye on the hooligans and all that type of thing. You know, a bit, you know, shades of that with FIFA 2 years later by sending them to Sardinia, for instance.
Yeah.
But in a way, you know, England's qualifying campaign, you have to say they kind of deserved to be at least considered to be one of the seeds. And there was only 2 seeds. You know, this wasn't kind of like, you know, a first set of seeds, a second set of seeds. It was just West Germany and England were deemed to be the seeds, and then everyone else, it was just a free draw basically. Spain, you know, they'd had their problems in the build-up again, and again they weren't considered initially, but then when they beat Denmark, suddenly the press changed the tune, and it was kind of like, well, everything's resting on the game against Italy, and you know, they could go all the way. So it was complex in the way that they kind of like shifted their opinion as well as games were going on. And then Ireland, everything, all the evidence pointed to Ireland doing well. They'd been unbeaten in 10 games. They won 9 of them. You know, they were the team in form, you know, apart from the Netherlands and probably the Soviet Union as well, you could throw in there. So, but because they were Ireland and because it was Jack Charlton, it still didn't stop the press having that kind of like, oh, they'll be the whipping boys. Yet all evidence of what they'd done in the build-up, you know, the players they had at their disposal, you know, pointed the fact that they could do something here, and they came so close to a place in the semi-finals. So yeah, you know, and then you have West Germany, and they've had 2 years worth of friendlies to build up to this, and there's a bit of rancor in the German camp because, you know, Beckenbauer doesn't quite fancy Matthias Hergay, the sweeper, because obviously he's very demanding over his sweepers, because, you know, that was Beckenbauer's role on the pitch. So it's kind of like, if you got to be a sweeper, then you have to be, you know, seriously. You
have to be me.
Yeah. And then up front, you had Voller, who was, you know, he'd had an injury hit season in Serie A with Roma. Klinsmann was still a bit wet behind the ears. You know, he was, you know, inexperienced at this point in time. His first goal at international level came shortly before the finals. So there were problems it was interesting in the fact that there were reasons for virtually everyone to win it. There were reasons to be pointed out for virtually everyone to fall flat on the face. And you could throw the Netherlands into that as well, by the fact that, you know, Van Basten had been injured, and, you know, he was kind of, you know, he wasn't match fit going into the tournament, shall we say. And, you know, and this was their first major tournament for 8 years. So, you know, there were genuine reasons to fancy every single team to do well, and there were every reason to expect them to fall flat on the face. And because of the brutality, again, come back to that word, 2 groups of death, you know, anything was going to be possible in this tournament.
And that's the way it panned out, really, wasn't it? I mean, I look, you talk about, look at the quality that was in that team. There's like McGrath, still, in my opinion, one of the finest centre halves of all time. And I had the kind of pleasure of watching him quite a lot, because I used to go and watch Villa play. I'm a Blues fan, but I used to go down to Villa, and he was unerringly superb in every game that he played. No one ever got near him. So you had him, and of course there's you know, Ray Houghton and Ronnie Whelan, John Aldridge to supposedly bagged the goals up front. But I looked further down the squad, and there's Dave Kelly, who played for Walsall, who's in there. Who evidently he'd had a magnificent season for Walsall that year to get in there.
And he also had a knack of scoring. You get these players sometimes who, I don't know, they look. You think they look out of place at international level, basically, when they're called up. Yet they take to it like a duck to water. There's a little bit of the Darius Vassell's in a way in that respect. When he was scoring goals for England, somewhat unexpectedly. David Kelly was like that. He got a hat trick on his debut, and he was scoring goals at a point in time when John Aldridge couldn't buy a goal in an Ireland shirt because and that was the intriguing thing about Jack Charlton, is that he would ask players he would call players up, but he would ask them to do an uncomfortable job for themselves. So Paul McGrath was playing in this competition in central midfield, not central defence. Had Liam Brady and Mark Lawrenson been available, who'd played a huge part in the qualifiers in a central midfield partnership. So Lawrenson was pushed into midfield to play alongside Brady. And at that point in time, he had Ronnie Whelan playing at left back. He had Paul McGrath playing at right back. And then, a lot of Aldridge's football was played with his back to goal because the ball would come in. He was, asked to be awkward and lay it off for the midfielders who would run in and take advantage, and sometimes central defenders. At that time, John Aldridge is being outscored by Kevin Moran, for instance, at international level. So it was kind of ludicrous. And when you break that squad down, you look at that squad, and I mention it in the book. It's packed full of players who have club medals galore to the name, far more than the England players do. You've got Ronnie Whelan there, who's a European Cup winner. You've got Kevin Sheedy, a Cup winner. You've got players who are just dripping in medals there. But they're being asked to play, a system that is being billed as being Wimbledon-esque. It's such a kind of like mad mix of what Ireland had there, and the players had to buy into. That was the big thing about it as well. Jack Charlton had to get the players to buy into it, even though they were kind of like, this isn't the football that we really want to be playing. We want to play with a bit more of a swagger and style. Yet it was massively effective, and you couldn't knock it. Because they rode the luck a little bit against England. Pat Bonner had a magnificent game. There's chances that, Lineker hits the frame of the goal, I think, 3 times, and Bonner just flinging himself all over the place. So there's a degree of luck, but then against the Soviet Union, they're the best team for 75 minutes. And they should build on that 1-0 lead, that incredible, the greatest shinned goal in history. From Ronnie Whelan there. And it's only when Protosov equalises and then it goes a bit remiss in the last 10 minutes and Ireland are hanging on. But there's kind of like, well, Ireland have beaten England, and if they can hang on for that victory against the Soviet Union, it's actually difficult for them not to reach the semi-finals at that point in time. And that's really how close it came for them. So when they played the Netherlands, yes, it's backs against the wall. They take a very pragmatic view. Let's just stop the Netherlands from playing and stop them from scoring. And it takes a bit of a freak goal to kind of like puncture that with about 8 minutes to go or so, or whatever it was. So, just so many great stories that are part of this competition.
Yeah, it's great. It was like Ireland were a puzzle for other international teams to unpick, weren't they? Because I don't think any side had ever come up against anything like that before. It was containment, but it was they used to strangle the life out of teams, didn't they? It was
Charlton had a simple philosophy. His take on it was to stop the opposition playing in the areas where they want to play, basically where they can do the most damage. And that it was just such a simplistic way to do it, and it worked. Yes, they bypassed the midfield quite a lot. But they could play because of the talent of the players that they had at the disposal. I mean, if you've never seen it, look up the goal that they score in beating Brazil in a friendly at Lansdowne Road. It's an absolute piece of art. That goal.
Brady
Yeah,
Drums it in at the near post. Yeah,
the Brady goal.
yeah.
But the build up to that goal is phenomenal. So they could play football without a shadow of a doubt. But it was just Charlton wouldn't necessarily let them, play football. Well, they were obviously playing football, but not the football they wanted to play. But within that, once they were on the crest of a wave and everything's working, then no one was complaining about it at all. The players fully bought into it, and the fans clearly did. So yeah, it was an incredible campaign for Ireland.
Yeah, so we got two groups of death. With there's the first group: Italy, Spain, West Germany, and Denmark, and then the second group, which is Netherlands, Soviet Union, Ireland, and England. What were the pick of the games in your opinion from those two groups? Because there were some great games, weren't there? And every game had its merit of sort. I don't think there was one bad game in that tournament. There was different kinds of games, but they were all kind of like interesting in some way or other.
They were there's so many good games in that competition. The Spain-Denmark game was an intriguing one that falls under the radar. 5 goals shared. There's periods of that game early in the first half and early in the second half where Denmark are knocking the ball around with ease, and it's like they're totally in control. And then it's just kind of like I don't know, they just lose concentration, and bang bang, there's 2 goals for Spain, and it's they were just punished for I don't know, lack of concentration at times. But that is a fascinating game to watch. So you've got Gordillo's incredible dipped free kick that just catches Rasmussen out. But then, Rasmussen saves a penalty from Mitchell in this game as well, which tends to go forgotten. Then you've got that magical goal from Michael Laudrup as well. So, you've got the rancor of Butragueno's clearly offside goal. He's so offside, and the linesman's in line with him as well. It's absolutely unreal how that is missed. So yeah, that's a fascinating game. The opening game, Italy versus West Germany, is a fine game of football, and it's one that Italy really should win. And West Germany get their equaliser. Andreas Bremer scores his free kick, and the free kick is given because Walter Zenger's kept hold of the ball for too long, as far as Keith Hackett is concerned. And the referees have been told to clamp down on this, on the goalkeepers taking too many steps, holding onto the ball for too long. And Hackett, letter of the law, first game of the tournament, he penalises it, and this is where West Germany get their equaliser. Yet it is the only time that a free kick is given in such circumstances. No other free kick is given across the breadth of the tournament in a similar fashion. And at the end of that game, kind of Italy have surprised themselves somewhat. And, West Germany kind of like their players leave the pitch shoulders slumped. And Italy are kind of celebrating, whereas you think, well, actually, that's a game where you think Italy should have won it. They've dropped a point there. Yet the reactions of each team, and West Germany kind of got away with one. The reactions of each team are the opposite of what they should be, really. Yet, I think Italy themselves are kind of bought into this, this billing of being, a work in progress, and this is just a stepping stone. But they proved to themselves against West Germany, against the hosts, the favourites for the tournament, that actually, it's coming together now. Never mind 2 years from now.
Yeah.
So, that was a magnificent game. There were some great performances by both West Germany and Italy against Spain and Denmark. And in the opposite group, the England-Ireland game is a stunner in Stuttgart, and obviously the England-Netherlands game as well in Dusseldorf. While the Ireland-Soviet Union game, the Soviet Union-Netherlands game in the group stages where Rats scores this magnificent winning goal. It's a game of containment for the Soviets. They absorb all of this Dutch pressure and then hit on the break, and then they hold on to this win. So there's marvelous games, there's fascinating games, and then when you go into the semi-finals, the drama involved in the Netherlands West Germany game. It's not a classic game, but it's got a magnificent punchline to it. And then you've got the Soviet Union winning the opposite semi-final against Italy, where it's 4 minutes in the second half with 2 goals scored within this 4 minutes, and it breaks Italy. And this is an Italy side that, I don't know, have suddenly become the favourites for at least a place in the final when they go in against the Soviet Union. So having been this under-considered youthful side, it was suddenly with the weight of the world thrown on the shoulders, which is a bit of a harbinger for them towards what happens 2 years later in their own World Cup.
Yeah.
They kind of crack. So yeah, just marvelous games all across the board, really.
Yeah, I do recall that the semi-final, the Netherlands versus Germany final, 2 really dodgy. But the Dutch penalties especially dodgy. I mean, the Klinsmann one you could give a bit of credence. I mean, he makes the most of it, but there is contact. But the other one, it seemed like the defender definitely got the ball, and the fall was just an afterthought. And the referee was quite willing to get. But I suppose you could look back and say the Germany penalty in the '74 World Cup final was a bit dodgy. So maybe it was history coming back to even itself out there, mate. But as you say, I mean, the Italy Soviet Union game, the Italians were on top in the first half, and I remember Dasaev on the cusp of half time pulling off a fantastic save, I think from Giannini from a header. And then in the rain of was it the Neckar Stadium where that was played?
Yes,
yeah, I think it was. Yeah, in the rain, they kind of lost momentum, and then Lobanovsky's machine kicked in. And I think at that point in the semi-final, going forward to the final, you would fancy the Soviets, wouldn't you? Especially after the kind of '86 World Cup, and it felt like they had unfinished business to prove. So you've had these 2 great finals, and then we move on to the final. Do you want to tell us the story of that final, Steve? Because it was a fantastic final, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a great final. Yeah, and the big thing as part of this is that the Netherlands kind of like had this, I don't know, settled side. They played the opening game against the Soviets, which had lost, and learnt so much from that game. Basically, they learnt their lessons, and they kept the kind of like, well, we know how to deal with this. Should we meet them again? And what it was that it was, what was the name? Was it Van? Oh no, what was it? Van Shipt. It was.
Yeah,
Van Shipt
and
John Bosman played that initial group game, and they both dropped out for the next game against England. And in came Van Basten, who played half an hour from the bench against the Soviets, and in crucially came Erwin Koeman, because for the opening game, Arnold Muren had been, I don't know, kind of like forced into the role of kind of being the shadow in midfield and trying to pick up, on Alenikov, and Zavarov. So he was given the disciplined midfield role. So the bringing in of Erwin Koeman freed up Arnold Buren for the remaining games, and obviously Van Basten just was Van Basten. There's no 2 ways about it. And that team that started against England in the next game for the Netherlands started all of the remaining games. The starting lineup never changed for the Netherlands all the way through to the final from there. Whereas the Soviet Union, they had injuries and suspensions here and there. There was the cruel suspension of Oleg Kuznetsov. What happened was UEFA had yellow cards from the qualifiers carried over into the finals. So when he picked up a yellow card in the semi-final, he was sanctioned by suspension for the final on the back of the previous yellow card being picked up like 12 months earlier. And within that, on one side of it, that's cruel. On the other side of it, it was a cynical challenge that needed a yellow card. And he went into within the first 3 minutes in that semi-final against Italy, and that he knew that he was on that tightrope. But the ludicrous nature of that was, I think there was about 13 players across the 2 teams, the Netherlands and the Soviet Union. Sorry, the Netherlands or the Soviet Union Italy semi-final. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's 13 or 14 players who were on that yellow card tightrope of picking a yellow card up and missing the final. So, you know, and within that, there was injury to Bessanov. So they lost half of their defence for the final. And Dasiev, he'd picked up an injury in the Ireland game. He had to be substituted and replaced by Shanov. And then within that, there was kind of like reports that he wouldn't play again in the tournament, that he was ruled out. So for Dasiev to actually make it back to that, you know, to fitness for the remaining games was quite the thing. Belanov had missed the semi-final through injury. Again, he wasn't expected to take part in the final. So there was a lot of, you know, there was a lot of churn for the Soviet Union. They had to drop Aleynikov back into defence. Vasily Rats had to drop into left back. So, you know, they'd lost half the defence. Half of the midfield was altered because of these, you know, needs to cover defensive roles. And Belanov is partly fit. So, you know, it kind of plays into the hands of the Netherlands, and you get Ruud Gullit scoring this magnificent bullet header. And then there's that Van Basten goal that just kind of like leaves Dasiev staggering around like a puppet on a string, cross with Trevor Burbick, who's just, you know, after Mike Tyson's landing in one. You know, it's everything about that goal is just a work of art. And then beyond that, the only thing it's really missing is the fact that Belanov misses that penalty. Van Breukelen gives the penalty away carelessly and then saves the result, you know, saves the penalty. I think with 20 odd minutes left to play, if Belanov gets that one past Van Breukelen, then the last 20 minutes is going to be kind of like absolutely wild. But once that penalty is saved, you know, the Soviets lose heart, they lose momentum, and it peters out into this deserved win for the Netherlands, because, you know, how can you not win the European Championship final when Van Basten's hit that one?
Yeah, they were, I think, arguably deserving champions, weren't they? I think definitely, and they put to bed those ghosts of 74 and 78. From my perspective, looking at that tournament, it seemed to be the most modern tournament to look at. From the, you know, like 84, from a purely aesthetic point of view, watching it on the television, or the visuals seem better, the kind of graphics seem better, and it just seemed to point forward to football beyond that period. So for me, that would be its legacy for me. But what would you say the legacy of 1988 was, Steve?
I think the football itself. I mean, in the immediacy after the tournament and all of what are always fascinating to read is, yes, the match reports after the match, but kind of like the day after, you know, kind of like the Tuesday of that, you know, the week following. If you look at the archive articles online, because that's when you get kind of like the navel gazing articles, the considered kind of, well, this is what we've learned from the tournament, and this is our take from it. And it's the style of the football that is all mentioned, this futuristic football, and that these signposts have been, you know, planted by Michels and Lobanovsky, and this is the way forward, and everyone will be playing this type of football for the next decade. Yet it wasn't the case. Pragmatism came charging right back in the years that followed. So yes, you know, rather than being the start of a new era in terms of the football on the pitch, it was the end of an era, basically, because, you know, those styles kind of swiftly fell out of fashion. And in a way, that's kind of where this fixation with not losing kind of kicks in post Euro 88. You know, teams setting out to win. You know, even England at Euro 88, you have to look at them. Say they did at least set out to try and win those games.
Yeah.
Mad circumstances in that loss to Ireland. Yeah, against the Netherlands at 1-1, there's a 15 to 20 minute period where England looked the more likely to go on and win that match, until, you know, the fate smiles on Van Basten instead. So, you know, they all had a go. There was no team that just set out to play football in a fetal position and, you know, let's not lose. You know, it was, and then that kind of creeps in for the 1990 World Cup. When you look at 1990, there's a lot of negativity on the pitch in 1990. let's not lose, let's not concede. You know, too many teams taking that route rather than let's give it a spin and let's see where we go.
Yeah, it was a kind of a utopian view of football, wasn't it, in '88? And I don't quite know what happened afterwards for the next 4 years, but it didn't seem as pure. It seemed to going in entirely the wrong direction after that. Well, the book, it's a fantastically entertaining read, massively engaging, a real crowd pleaser, Steve. Do you want to tell the listeners where it's available, where they can get hold of the book?
Yeah, all your regular places. You know, Amazon stock it. Obviously, from an author's perspective, if you can go buy it at a traditional bookshop or get it ordered via a traditional bookshop, we do get a few extra pennies than we would do from the people at Amazon. But yeah, Waterstones, Hive, you know, any of those, you know, Barnes, there's so many out there. You can, yeah, you'll be able, if you go on the Pitch Pub, actually, if you go in the Pitch Publishing shop and seek the book out there, the great at Pitch is that down at the bottom of the page they'll have links to everywhere. You know, you know, all the big places that you can buy it online, WH Smith, etc. But yeah, if you can go out and buy it at one of those, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I always say it's best to buy from a bookshop. I used to work in the book trade for 5 years, so it's all for me. It's, you know, go and give the money to your local bookshop, because it's more gratifying.
Well, that's it. It keeps the bookshops going, but it also lets the author have a few extra pennies in the pocket as well.
Of course, mate. Yeah. And have you got anything else lined up? Any other projects on the bubble at the moment, Steve?
Yes, I'm already well into the next one. What I tend to do is I've said this a few times, is that when I'm writing a book, I have the next one in mind, and I'm already researching that one. So when you hit those blocks where you can't write the one that you're writing, you know, my therapy to that is to fall into rabbit holes and you know, and do all the research, because I love the research part of this as much as the writing part.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's Istanbul. You know, next year will be 20 years. You know, frighteningly, it'll be 20 years since that Liverpool comeback against Milan. And I was in Istanbul that night,
Wow.
luckily enough. So yeah, and I saw, you know, I was at Stamford Bridge for the first leg of the semi-final, all of the Anfield nights, you know, Olympiacos and Juventus, and you know, obviously the Chelsea game that went to the wire. So yeah, and with, you know, cast within such a dysfunctional season, really, you know, there's no right to win that Champions League, really.
Yeah, the side as well, the team are like a ragtag of players who you wouldn't normally see a Liverpool shirt, but
it is indeed, and that's why with this book, you know, it will go into, you know, all of those, you know, rough edges as well as the good stuff.
fantastic. It was an incredible final. I just, you know, I feel sorry for the kids who weren't alive when it happened, because watching that live has to be one of the most exhilarating football watches I've ever had in my life. And you were there. You were actually there, mate. That's
it was yeah. It was an incredible experience. I mean, I've spoken to Jamie Carragher, so I've got to have, like, you know, perspective of in the dressing room, and you know, and I've got, you know, a few people who were in the press box that night and along the run as well. So it'll be a triangulation. My own personal experiences of following that mad campaign and that success, but also, you know, those who are in the press box, those who are, you know, even in the dressing room. So yeah, I'm enjoying them all. You know, I'm blessed the fact that I only write what I want to write. You know, and you know, but this one's got that personal slant on it as well. So yeah, totally enjoying it.
Well, they say write about the things you love, don't they? And if that you can't
Totally.
love anything more than your own club, can you really?
Absolutely.
Steve, thank you, mate. It's been great having you as a guest again. And good luck with the book. It deserves to be a success, because it's a fantastic read, guys, out there. So get yourself a copy, because it's wicked. It's really great book. So see you next time on Football Geeks. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks again, Steve.
No problem. Thanks, Phil.